Disney World has a reputation for being expensive, and honestly, a lot of that reputation is earned. Deluxe resorts routinely run past $600 a night, sometimes well past $1,000 for the nicer view categories, and it's easy to walk away thinking a Disney trip just isn't in the cards without that kind of budget sitting in the bank first. That reputation gets repeated so often online that plenty of families rule out an on-property stay entirely before ever checking what the actual cheapest options look like. Here's what doesn't get talked about nearly enough, though. There's a genuine tier of resorts built specifically for guests who want the real Disney experience, full transportation, real theming, the actual magic, without the luxury price tag attached to it. Some of these are official value resorts, Disney's own budget category, built from the ground up around exactly this kind of traveler. A couple of them are moderate tier picks that consistently get called out as the smartest bang for your buck on the entire property, resorts that cost a little more, but hand back a lot more in return. Today we're counting down 10 of the best cheap resorts at Disney World in 2026, verified against current guest reviews and this year's actual rack rates, not outdated numbers from a blog post nobody's updated in years. Quick reminder to hit subscribe before we count these down. Number 10, Disney's All-Star Sports Resort. This is typically the single cheapest resort anywhere on Disney property, sitting at or near the very bottom of the entire pricing chart for 2026. The resort most guests default to when the goal is simply spending as little as possible while still technically staying on Disney property. What you're getting for that price is bold, oversized sports-themed icons scattered around the resort, giant helmets, enormous basketballs, tennis rackets, several stories tall. The kind of larger-than-life theming that photographs, well, even if the rooms themselves are fairly basic and haven't seen a major overhaul in a while. What matters more is that you're still getting a real on-property Disney stay, full access to Disney transportation, early theme park entry, and everything else that comes standard with staying on Disney property, rather than at an off-site hotel that might technically sit closer to the parks but strips away all of those built-in perks the moment you check in somewhere that isn't Disney-owned. This resort is the right call specifically for budget-first travelers who know they won't be spending much time in the actual room anyway, since most of a Disney trip happens out in the parks regardless of where you're sleeping at night. And a basic room at the lowest price point simply makes more financial sense for that kind of traveler than paying extra for theming they'll barely see awake. Number 9, Disney's All-Star Movies Resort. This sits just above All-Star Sports in price, still solidly in the cheapest bracket on property, and it comes with genuinely beloved theming that guest reviews specifically call out again and again, often naming it as their personal favorite among the 3 All-Star resorts, despite the identical room layouts underneath the theming. Giant icons themed around 101 Dalmatians, Fantasia, and Toy Story turn the resort's courtyards into something that feels like walking through an actual movie set rather than a standard hotel parking lot, with details tucked into corners that reward guests who actually take the time to look around rather than walking straight past. Here's the honest catch worth knowing about before booking, though, and it's a real one that shows up consistently enough to matter. All-Star Movies sits as the last stop on the shared All-Star bus route, which means by the time a bus actually reaches this resort, it's already picked up guests from both All-Star Sports and All-Star Music first, often already close to full by the time it pulls in, leaving standing room only during the busiest parts of the day. That translates to more crowded buses and longer waits during peak travel times, a real, repeatedly cited downside that shows up across multiple independent reviews from guests who otherwise loved everything else about their stay, and specifically mention it as the one thing they'd warn a friend about before booking here themselves. If the theming here speaks to you, it's still a great pick, and plenty of returning guests specifically request this resort trip after trip despite the transportation quirk. Just go in knowing the trade-off up front, rather than being surprised by it on your first morning trying to get to the parks with a rope drop plan already in mind. Number 8, Disney's All-Star Music Resort. This resort runs in the same price bracket as its 2 sibling resorts, and it shares that same basic value proposition: real Disney theming and full on-property benefits at the lowest price point available anywhere on the map, with giant icons built around musical instruments and genres scattered throughout the courtyards. What sets All-Star Music apart from its siblings is something a lot of larger families specifically need and don't always find at this price point: family suites. These are the cheapest rooms anywhere on all of Disney World property that sleep up to 6 guests comfortably. A genuine standout for families who'd otherwise be forced into booking 2 completely separate rooms just to fit everyone under one roof, doubling the cost in the process. If you're traveling with a bigger group and trying to keep everyone together without doubling your room costs just to make the numbers work, this is worth a close look specifically for that reason, even if the standard rooms here don't stand out much beyond what the other All-Star resorts already offer. The family suites do book up quickly during peak seasons, so it's worth reserving well ahead of a summer or holiday trip if this specific room type is the reason for choosing this resort over its siblings. Number 7. Disney's Port Orleans Resort, French Quarter. This one's a step up into the moderate tier, but it earns its spot on this list because of how it compares to the larger moderate resorts sitting around it. French Quarter is the smaller sibling to the much bigger Port Orleans Riverside next door, connected by a short walkway and a shared boat launch, and that smaller footprint translates directly into a noticeably quieter, calmer atmosphere than most moderate or value resorts manage to offer across a full stay. Guests who find bigger properties like the All-Stars or Caribbean Beach a little overwhelming. Too many buildings, too much walking between the room and the main pool, too much general noise and bustle echoing through shared courtyards tend to gravitate toward French Quarter specifically because it feels more manageable and more intimate without sacrificing the moderate tier amenities entirely. If you're a couple or a smaller travel party who wants moderate tier polish without a sprawling resort layout eating into your actual vacation time, just getting from point A to point B, this is one of the better picks on property for exactly that reason. The trade-off worth knowing is that French Quarter has fewer dining options than its larger sibling, since it's simply a smaller property with less real estate to work with. So guests here often walk over to Riverside for additional food choices during a longer stay. Number 6. Disney's Fort Wilderness Resort Cabins. This one breaks the mold completely compared to everything else on this list. Instead of a standard hotel room stacked among dozens of identical others, you're getting an actual freestanding cabin tucked into the woods, priced right around moderate tier rates, despite feeling like a completely different category of stay altogether, closer to a rustic vacation rental than a typical resort room. That's a real change of pace for guests who want more physical space and more privacy than a hotel room can offer, complete with a full kitchen in most units and a private deck, all while still staying fully on Disney property with access to Disney transportation and every other on-property perk. The trade-off is that Fort Wilderness sits further out than most resorts, spread across a genuinely large wooded campground, meaning you're relying on buses and internal transportation to get around and to reach the parks rather than a quick walk or a monorail ride from your front door. For families who specifically want that cabin in the woods feeling, without actually leaving Disney World behind though, there's nothing else on property quite like it. The campground setting also means genuinely quiet nights compared to a standard resort building. No hallway traffic outside your door, no elevator dings at midnight, just the actual sound of the woods around you, which is either a huge selling point or a mild inconvenience depending entirely on what a guest is looking for out of their stay. Number 5. Disney's Caribbean Beach Resort. This moderate resort earns its spot here for one specific reason that matters a lot to plenty of travelers planning their days around specific parks: Skyliner gondola access. Caribbean Beach connects directly to both Epcot and Hollywood Studios via the Skyliner, a genuinely scenic ride that glides over lakes and treetops rather than sitting in traffic, and it's a real transportation advantage over moderate resorts that rely entirely on the bus system to get anywhere on property. If your trip is going to be heavily weighted toward those 2 specific parks, having a fast, direct gondola ride instead of waiting on a bus queue that might run every 20 minutes is a genuinely underrated perk that can save real time across a multi-day visit, time that adds up to an extra hour or more in the parks by the end of a week-long trip. It's worth factoring in, specifically if Epcot and Hollywood Studios are where you're planning to spend most of your park days, even if the resort's own theming doesn't stand out quite as much as some of the other picks on this list. The resort's various themed villages, Trinidad, Jamaica, Barbados among them, do offer some visual variety across the grounds, though most reviewers agree the theming here plays a distant second to the practical transportation advantage as the real reason to book it. Number 4. Disney's Port Orleans Resort Riverside. This is the bigger of the two Port Orleans resorts, built around a distinct southern, plantation, and bayou theme that stands out from the more generic moderate resort. Look, a lot of guests describe as somewhat interchangeable between properties once you've stayed at a couple of them back to back. Spanish moss hangs from real trees throughout the grounds, and the resort's layout genuinely feels more like wandering through a themed environment than walking between standard hotel buildings. What genuinely sets Riverside apart, though, is a specific upgrade option most guests don't even know exists until they're already deep into researching the resort directly, often well after they've already assumed moderate resorts don't offer anything like this. About a quarter of the resort's total rooms are royal guest rooms, themed around Princess and the Frog, complete with ornate beds featuring headboards with actual fiber optic special effects that light up softly at night, along with gold and crystal accents throughout the room that go well beyond what you'd normally expect at this price tier. It's the kind of themed, elevated room experience you'd usually expect to find only at a deluxe resort, priced instead within the standard moderate tier. If a themed splurge room genuinely matters to your trip, especially for a family with kids who'd light up walking into a room that looks like it belongs in the movie itself, but a full deluxe resort price tag doesn't fit the budget, this is one of the smartest compromises available anywhere on property. Booking a royal guest room does cost a bit more than a standard room at the same resort, so it's worth requesting it directly at booking, rather than assuming it's automatically assigned, since availability is tighter than for standard rooms given how popular the theme has become since it first launched. Number 3. Disney's Coronado Springs Resort. This moderate resort gets specifically singled out by more than one major Disney travel outlet as the single best value pick in the entire moderate category, and that reputation is well earned rather than just repeated blindly from one site to the next. Coronado Springs offers genuine advantages over the other moderate resorts in both service quality and room quality, a noticeable step up in polish that guests specifically comment on after coming from a value resort on a previous trip, all while still sitting comfortably below deluxe tier pricing that can double or triple the nightly rate for a similar room category. The resort's Grand Destino Tower adds a genuinely upscale option within the same property, letting guests split the difference between moderate pricing and something closer to a deluxe feel without actually booking a deluxe resort. For guests who've outgrown the value resorts, maybe after a few trips where the theming started to feel a little too loud or the rooms a little too basic for what they're now willing to spend, but aren't ready to commit to deluxe level costs just yet, Coronado Springs is repeatedly recommended as the resort that delivers the most for the price, striking a real balance between comfort and cost that a lot of other moderate resorts don't quite manage as cleanly. The resort's size can be a genuine downside for some travelers, though, since it's one of the larger moderate properties on the map, meaning a room assignment on the far end of the grounds can mean a longer walk to the main pool or the bus stop than guests expect walking in. It's worth requesting a room closer to the main building if that kind of distance matters to your group. Number 2. Disney's Art of Animation Resort. This is the most expensive of the 5 official value resorts, but it earns that slightly higher price with the most immersive theming found anywhere in the entire value category, arguably rivaling some moderate resorts in terms of sheer visual impact and sheer scale of the build. Full movie sets built around The Lion King, Finding Nemo, Cars, and The Little Mermaid transform each section of the resort into something that genuinely feels like stepping directly into the film itself. Especially walking through the Cars courtyard styled after Route 66 with its neon signage and desert backdrop, or the Lion King section surrounded by savanna-inspired scenery and character details tucked into every corner of the courtyard. The resort is also home to the Big Blue Pool, themed after Finding Nemo, and it happens to be the single largest pool anywhere on all of Disney World property, big enough that it never quite feels crowded even during peak summer travel season. Guest reviews consistently rank Art of Animation as the top value resort on platforms like Yelp, specifically citing the theming as the deciding factor over anything related to price or room size. Family suites here also give larger groups a genuine alternative to the standard rooms, themed specifically to Cars and the Lion King, complete with details that make even a fairly standard hotel suite feel like part of the story. If you want value tier pricing without giving up genuinely immersive theming, and you don't mind paying slightly more than the all-star resorts to get it, this is very likely the pick that's going to deliver the most for your money. Guests specifically traveling with young kids tend to rate this resort highest of all the value options, since the theming genuinely engages children in a way the more abstract sports and movie icons at the All-Stars sometimes don't manage to the same degree. And number 1, Disney's Pop Century Resort. Across nearly every major source covering Disney World value resorts, from Disney Tourist Blog to Mouse Savers to Inside the Magic to independent guest review aggregation across platforms like Yelp and TripAdvisor, Pop Century gets named the single best overall value resort on property. And it's not particularly close when you actually line up the reviews side by side. Starting around $213 for 2026, it sits just above the all-star resorts in price. A genuinely modest jump, but the difference in what you actually get for that small increase is significant enough that most sources treat it as a no-brainer upgrade rather than a splurge. Skyliner Gondola Access connects Pop Century directly to Epcot and Hollywood Studios, the same transportation advantage that made Caribbean Beach stand out earlier on this list. Except here it comes bundled with value tier pricing instead of moderate rates. Room decor here is noticeably more updated and less visually loud than the all-star resorts, a real consideration for guests who find the oversized sports and movie icons at other value resorts a little much after a few days. Splash play areas give younger kids somewhere to burn energy without needing a full pool day, which matters more than it sounds like on a rest day when nobody wants to change into swimsuits for a 2-hour park excursion. One source put it about as plainly as possible. For a couple without kids simply looking for the cheapest, genuinely good way to stay on Disney property, Pop Century should be the very first resort on the list. Full stop, no real competition. It's not the cheapest option on this entire list. It's simply the one that delivers the most value for the modest step up in price, which is exactly why it's sitting at number 1 instead of somewhere further down. Worth noting too, Pop Century's decade-themed sections, the 50s through the 90s, each carry their own distinct visual identity, giant Rubik's Cubes and jukeboxes and yo-yos scattered throughout the grounds, giving the resort a real sense of variety even though it's built around a single overarching concept rather than several unrelated themes competing with each other. So here's the real takeaway across all 10 of these resorts we just walked through. Cheap at Disney World doesn't mean giving up the actual magic, and it's worth saying that plainly, since the assumption a lot of first-time visitors carry into their planning is that budget and quality are simply opposites at Disney specifically, the way they might be at a lot of other travel destinations. The 5 official value resorts deliver real theming and full on-property benefits at the lowest price point Disney offers anywhere on the map. And the strongest moderate picks layer on real upgrades, Skyliner Access, themed suites, and freestanding cabins without jumping all the way up to deluxe pricing that can double or triple the cost of an otherwise similar trip for a comparable room size. The right resort for your trip really comes down to what you personally need most out of the stay itself. Standout theming that makes the room feel like part of the vacation rather than just somewhere to sleep, extra space for a bigger family that doesn't want to split across 2 rooms and 2 separate bills, faster transportation specifically to the parks you're planning to spend the most time in, or simply the lowest possible price point to get you on property in the first place rather than staying off-site and losing every one of Disney's built-in perks in the process. Which of these 10 have you stayed at, and which one would you actually recommend to a friend planning their first budget-conscious Disney trip without much experience navigating all the different resort tiers on their own? Let us know in the comments below. And if this helped you narrow down where to stay on your next visit, hit like on your way out and subscribe if you haven't already. We've got plenty more Disney World planning breakdowns like this one coming.